Is Bournemouth you live? Yep, all the way from Bournemouth. So John is a veteran accountant, virtual CFO, and author of the book Learning Zero. He spent a decade as a pioneering founder in the accounting tech tar pit and will share stories of obsessively building 55 software alerts for a market that wasn't ready, selling his profitable practice to fund a seed round of personal pain, and the Christmas his kids asked for a working shower instead of toys. We can please give a round of applause for John.
Did I write that? Makes you sound quite pompous. Good evening. Most of you will probably know me as an accountant, but today I'm going to speak to you as a recovering founder. So, typically as an accountant, I'm normally the one called in to dissect someone's business failures and point out where they've gone wrong. But for your pleasure this evening, the shoe is firmly on the other foot, and I'm going to explain how I managed to take 2 decades of technical knowledge and expertise and make a mess so big that everyone's accountants in this room would probably cry. So this is way back in 2012, so before AI. I think for a bit of context, we were probably on about the iPhone 5 at this point. So this when Zero kind of launched in the UK and it was starting to become a big thing, and all we kept hearing all the time was real-time accounting, and I decided that was just a load of rubbish and a marketing myth. So I had a client who was a software developer, and we spent a day sitting in an office down in Bournemouth, and we came up with a product called Smart Cash Flow. We thought this will be the thing that's really going to help people get access to that information and do something useful with it. Unfortunately, what we found when we started looking at people's data is it was complete and utter rubbish. And we thought you can't really forecast the future based on a load of historical crap. So we thought we may as well pivot. As we know the data inside the systems are rubbish, that's what we're actually going to concentrate on. We're going to build a tool that's going to find that information and help people correct it and have good information going forwards. So Lee, unbeknown at the time, I went away and came up with 55 alerts. I became obsessed by the idea that every piece of information that went into someone's bookkeeping software was pristine, and if it wasn't, you'd know about it and you'd be able to correct it and do something about it. So we spent almost 2 years. Lee's software company had gone from 0 employees to 15 at this time. So he kept being bombarded and pestered by me to go faster. And of course, Lee was just thinking, where's the return on investment for me here? Because I've got a successful software company, and this guy just keeps badgering me all the time to build more and build more. Because at this time, we didn't even know if there was a market. We were just working purely off my presumption that everybody on the planet wanted to do things in the same way. So we came to a bit of an impasse. Lee was fed up, and I was getting bored.
Just put your microphone closer to your mouth. Yeah.
Okay. Lee had got bored, he felt the pressure, so we decided to put our money where our mouth was, and we actually launched at ZeroCon in 2015. What we actually found is we were so early to market at that point that whilst it was well received, most people had 1 or 2 clients on cloud computing. It wasn't really much of a thing at that time. To get the benefit from the product, you really needed to have all of your clients on there. So Lee exited quickly at that point because he knew there was no way he was ever going to get any money back for the time that he'd invested, so we decided to mothball it and go our separate ways. Now, while I was at ZeroCon 2015, I got the ear of a fellow accountant from Australia who had sold his accountancy practice and built a piece of account tech and was also at ZeroCon. Now, this fellow's called Guy Pearson. The product was called Practice Ignition. He's since gone on to raise over £100 million and is a serial investor in other people's businesses. So he's got a bit of game in what he was talking about. And at one point, the one piece of advice that Guy gave me, which is the best piece of advice I've ever ignored, which was pick one thing and do it well. He'd sold his practice and gone all in on the software. Unbeknown to Guy, I suffer from something called superhero syndrome. So whilst Guy was explaining his story, all I was thinking was, that's fine for you, Guy, but I'm a superhero. I can build an app, run an accountancy practice, look after a new and growing family, it'll all be fine because it's me. What I didn't know at the time is if you actually try and fly in 4 different directions at the same time, you end up just spinning in circles, and crashing and burning, which is what happens. So fast forward to about tail end of 2018, I've got to a point, the accountancy practice that I was running had grown. We had an office, we had staff, everything was brilliant, but I was bored. I had no purpose anymore, and I got to the point where I'm quite destructive when I'm bored and don't have anything to do. So at that point I thought, I know, Hindsight version 2. It's been in my head for 6 years now. I never gave it a proper go. So that's what I decided to do. In all honesty, at that point in my life, I was actually signed off with depression. That's how bad things had kind of got for me. Going into the office, I just couldn't even be bothered to do that. So I was looking for something to shake me out of that, out of that depression at that time. I wanted to move quickly, so I didn't want to bother trying to raise money. So I thought, I know, I've got an asset. I'll sell my accountancy practice. That will give me enough money to get me going. And that's what I did at the second attempt. But that's a story for another day. Now, with money burning a hole in my pocket, I kind of thought, right, this is it now. This is the opportunity to move forward. We didn't actually launch Hindsight on the Zero Marketplace until June 2021. So nearly 3 years after the event. We decided we'd invest some money into a new business called Early Adopters Hub, which was a Caltech product market fit consultancy. We'd pretty much finished building the product. We stumbled across this and thought, this sounds brilliant. We've got access to the upper echelons of the marketing community. Be great, we can get some validation, some slaps on the back, and then we'll be able to win our early customers. Unfortunately, again, what we found, you'd think I would have learned this from the first time, when we plugged the system into other accountants' software, we were hit with a barrage of tens of thousands of alerts. Because again, the quality of the data that we were accessing and working with was absolutely dire. I thought, being 6 years later, working with zero MVPs, podcasting and guest paneling, influencers of the future, that we'd be onto a pretty good bet that the data would be good, but it wasn't. We spent another year ripping the software apart to rebuild it so that it worked for the lowest common denominator, because the thought process was, if the top guys' data is this bad, when you open that to the rest of the market, you can only imagine what's going to happen. So after that, we started to gain a bit of traction after going through the process of the Early Adopters Hub. At this point, I started to fall into the automation trap where we had a very small team and we had limited resources, so everything we did, I wanted to automate the hell out of it. So we started to produce swanky videos, 40-page guides, playbooks, CRM, email, onboarding, sequences, you name it, we were doing it. The brutal reality is nobody watched or read any of that stuff that I've spent hundreds of man hours carefully putting together. All they wanted was some cuddles. So as we found through the process, ultimately doing the manual hand-holding process and giving cuddles to everyone is a very expensive thing to do, especially when you're running out of money. Makes me shudder when I think about this. Anyone in the room had to pitch for money? Enjoyable process?
Loved it.
You loved it? Something wrong with you. This was by far the worst part of my entire journey. Going and asking or begging for money when you know that you're on your last legs is a difficult thing to do. So I was tasked with going out and playing the game I just kept being told. Play the game, John, just play the game. Which basically meant get any money you can off anyone, lie about it, and then do with it what you want afterwards. That was kind of, what I was hearing. But unfortunately, as an accountant, my life is dictated to by facts and figures. So that just felt completely dishonest, and there was no way that I wanted to go down that path. I've got to be honest, I even paid to go on a course to teach me how to pitch, and even after I did that, it was still absolutely terrible. No one was going to lend me money because I didn't want it, and they could see that in my eyes. This was the beginning of the end. My second co-founder and CTO, Mike, we sat down to talk about how I could go and shape my moneymaker to continue to fund the dream. And Mike actually said, "It's not a dream, John, this is an absolute living nightmare. I'm off." And that was, unfortunately, Mike's such a good guy. I've known him for years. He lives around the corner from me, and I still see him nearly every day walking the dogs. And we both just know that it was pain. That period of time was pain. Mike, unfortunately, he wasn't a risk taker. He wanted a job, he wanted a 9 to 5, he had a new family, and ultimately his wife didn't like the idea that we had X months worth of money to live on before, he had to leave anyway. So I hedged my bets at this point. I couldn't find another Mike, because Mike had finished my sentences for me. I certainly didn't have enough cash to go and find another Mike, so at that point we outsourced the development to India. Within a week, the system had crashed for 2 days. There was no access for anybody. So as you can imagine, I was going absolutely ballistic at developers in India who had literally just got their hands on the code, didn't know what the system was, how it worked, and I was trying to pacify, angry customers that wanted to know why they couldn't get access to their clients' data. And that ultimately was, very much the beginning of the end, because it just made me realise how fragile running a software company is when you're not a developer. So, where did I get to in the end with all of this? So ultimately, I'd sold my business. I did manage to convince some people to invest. Remortgaged the house, racked up 40k of credit card debt. Missed 15 payments, including a chunk of mortgage payments there. I was broken, but I was still going. Emotionally and financially, I was an absolute wreck, but I was still standing, and I was still happy to move forward with this. It was only at that time in December 22 when I said to the kids, what do you want for Christmas? And they said, "We don't want toys, we don't want iPads, we would just like a working hot shower." Because for over 2 years, the kids had been enjoying cold showers because paying for a shower to be fixed was a luxury that unfortunately I wasn't prepared to pay for because I was too busy paying for software development. Anyone know this guy? Yeah. So I'm going to wrap up with my things that I've learned now, but if you want any wisdom, please watch Kung Fu Panda, because that's where I get all of my inspiration and motivational quotes from. So ultimately, what did I learn through this process? The first thing is that being a qualified accountant is a luxury fallback. As long as you don't cause irreparable damage to yourself, you've always got a high-paid career to fall back on, and I know that's what an awful lot of founders would give their right arm to have. Do things that try and do things to be, don't do things to be right, do them to be happy. I found during this process over the 10 years, what I've acknowledged with myself is that ultimately I was building this piece of software because I wanted to prove that other people were wrong. I wanted to prove that accountants, bookkeepers out there were doing a terrible job. And ultimately, if you're trying to do something that's going to cause damage to yourself or anyone else, you have to stop and think, what is the point of doing that? So my advice to you would be, choose to be happy rather than choose to be right. Thank you.